One slap in a Missouri diner silenced a room, but 6 quiet words from an old veteran turned the tables completely. The sound of that slap didn't just echo inside the diner, it cut through the entire room like someone had dropped a glass on a tile floor. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Coffee cups hovered in the air, untouched. You could almost hear the ceiling fan creaking above the counter as people tried to process what had just happened. Eugene Carter, 81 years old, a black veteran with a chest full of history and a back that had carried more than most men could imagine, sat there at the counter of Louie's Diner in Springfield, Missouri. He wasn't asking for attention. All he wanted was a plate of eggs, some toast, and a hot cup of coffee before heading home. But trouble has a way of finding the quiet ones. Kyle Mercer, a broad-shouldered biker with tattoos creeping up his neck, had been sitting 3 stools down. He'd been loud from the moment he walked in, revving his Harley outside as if the whole world needed to know he'd arrived. His leather vest was patched with symbols that made a few customers shift uncomfortably, though no one said a word. At first, he just stared at Eugene. Then the muttering started. "You really think you did something for this country, old man?" Kyle sneered, leaning closer. His voice carried enough for nearby tables to catch every word. Eugene didn't flinch. He took a sip of his coffee, eyes steady, almost calm. Kyle wasn't satisfied. He slapped the counter, causing a spoon to rattle. "I asked you a question. What did your so-called service even do for guys like me?" The waitress, Brenda, froze mid-step with a tray of pancakes. "Kyle, don't start," she warned, her voice low. But Kyle stood, towering over Eugene, his presence daring anyone to interfere. "You don't even belong in here. You think wearing that old jacket with the army patch means something?" Eugene finally looked at him. His face was weathered, but firm, his voice even. "Son, I don't need to prove anything to you." The room held its breath. Then, out of nowhere, Kyle's hand cracked across Eugene's cheek. The sound was sharp, cruel, and unnecessary. The veteran's head tilted slightly, but he didn't fall, didn't cry out. He just straightened his back, placed his palm over the counter, and steadied himself. Gasps rippled through the diner. A little boy sitting with his mother near the window whispered, "Mom, he hit him." His mother quickly pulled him close, shushing him as her eyes darted around for help. The truck driver in the corner clenched his fists but stayed in his booth. 2 teenagers by the jukebox exchanged nervous looks, their hands twitching toward their phones, but unsure if recording would make things worse. Eugene adjusted his jacket, his eyes never leaving Kyle. The red mark on his face stood out, but his dignity was untouched. He reached for his coffee cup again, sipped slowly, and said just 6 words. "My son's on his way." That was it. No yelling, no threat. Just a statement delivered with the calm of a man who had seen worse battles than a bully in a diner. Kyle chuckled, shaking his head like he'd just won something. "What's he gonna do? He's probably just as weak as you." But some of the regulars knew the truth. They knew Eugene's son, and suddenly the tension in the air shifted. Not all fear anymore, but a sense of waiting. Waiting to see what those 6 words really meant. But Kyle had no idea what was about to walk through that door. The diner stayed frozen, as if someone had pressed pause on life. Nobody quite knew what to do. The smell of bacon and coffee still hung in the air, but it was like nobody noticed anymore. All eyes were fixed on Eugene. The old man sat there with his shoulders straight, hands resting calmly on the counter. He didn't shout. He didn't push back. He didn't even rub the sting on his cheek. That kind of reaction, the absence of it, almost unsettled people more than if he had exploded with anger. Kyle Mercer, on the other hand, fed on attention. He smirked at the silence, pulling his chair back with a screech of metal legs against linoleum. "See that? Not even a peep out of him," he said, turning to the room. "This is your so-called hero, an old man who can't even defend himself." Nobody laughed. Brenda, the waitress, set her tray down on the counter, her hands shaking slightly. She leaned toward Eugene. "You okay, Mr. Carter?" Eugene gave her the smallest nod. "I'm fine, Brenda." "Don't worry yourself." That steady tone, so matter-of-fact, made people glance at one another. There was no bitterness in it, no fear, just calm. The kind of calm that only comes from someone who's walked through storms before. Kyle didn't like it. He wanted fire. He wanted a fight. He stepped closer again, jabbing a finger at Eugene's chest. Answer me this, old man. What did all your medals, all your service, actually do for this country? You think anyone really cares? You're just another forgotten soldier. Eugene turned slowly, his eyes steady. Young man, he said softly, you wouldn't last 5 minutes in the places I've been. The words were plain, but the weight behind them made Kyle hesitate, if only for a second. Then Eugene went back to his plate, cutting into his eggs like the world hadn't just stopped. The act was so normal, so steady, that it made Kyle look ridiculous by comparison. A truck driver in the corner finally spoke. Kyle, that man's got more backbone than you'll ever have. His voice was low, gravelly, and tired, but it carried. Kyle spun toward him. Say that again? The driver leaned back, unfazed. You heard me. The biker's fists clenched, his temper rising again, but before he could react, Eugene lifted his hand, not to strike, but simply to set down his fork. He looked around the room, making eye contact with strangers, neighbors, people who'd been too afraid to say a word. There's no need for anyone else to get hurt, Eugene said. I told you. My son's on his way. Something in the way he said it, calm but final, silenced even Kyle. Brenda, still standing nearby, frowned. Mr. Carter, you want me to call the sheriff? Eugene shook his head gently. No need. Let's give it a few minutes. People didn't understand it yet, but they felt it. They felt there was something behind those words, something waiting just beyond the glass door of the diner. Kyle scoffed, trying to mask the flicker of doubt. Your son, huh? What's he gonna do? Call more old men to back him up? Eugene didn't look at him. He just sipped his coffee, that red mark on his cheek still bright against his skin. And the strangest thing was, his quiet dignity started to weigh heavier in the room than Kyle's rage. Customers who'd kept their heads down were now sitting straighter. Some nodded subtly at Eugene, as if giving him silent support. The slap had hurt, yes, but it had also revealed something about this man, something steady, something unshakable. But the silence wouldn't last forever, because whispers were about to ripple through the room. The longer the silence stretched, the heavier the air felt inside Louie's diner. People wanted to speak, to break the tension, but most didn't know how. That's when the whispers began, low, uncertain, but impossible to ignore. At the booth near the window, a mother leaned toward her teenage daughter. That's Eugene Carter, she said softly. He fought in Vietnam. Everyone around here knows his story. The daughter glanced at Eugene, eyes wide. He doesn't look scared at all. No, the mother whispered back, because he's seen worse than this. 2 tables over, a pair of college kids debated whether to pull out their phones. Man, this is the kind of thing that goes viral, one muttered. But if we record, that biker might come after us. The other shook his head. I don't know. Look at that old guy. He's not even flinching. Maybe we should... At the counter, Brenda tried to act like she was refilling ketchup bottles, but her ears caught every murmur. People weren't just whispering about Eugene anymore. They were whispering about Kyle, too. That's Kyle Mercer, an older man said in a hushed voice. Got thrown out of the Moose Lodge last month for starting a fight. Figures, another replied. Always looking for someone smaller to push around. Kyle noticed. He wasn't deaf. The sideways glances, the lips moving just out of reach, it ate at him. He wanted the room afraid, not judgmental. His pride was built on intimidation, and Eugene wasn't playing along. He slammed his palm on the counter again. Y'all got something to say? Then say it to me. His voice boomed, shattering the whispers into silence. But Eugene, still sitting upright, didn't look at him. Instead, he turned slightly toward the little boy by the window, the one who had spoken earlier. Son, Eugene said gently, don't let a man's anger make you forget your manners. Respect is worth more than strength. The boy nodded, clutching his mother's sleeve. The diner grew still again, but the atmosphere had changed. Eugene wasn't just sitting quietly anymore. He was teaching, showing everyone in that room how to hold dignity, even in the face of humiliation. Kyle's face reddened. Don't talk to him. Talk to me, old man. He stepped closer, his boots echoing with each stomp. This time, Eugene finally turned his full attention back to him. You've already said enough, he replied. Now you'll wait with the rest of us. Wait for what? Kyle snapped. Eugene's words were calm, steady, almost quiet. For my son, That single phrase rolled through the diner again. People exchanged glances. Some mouthed, "His son?" with eyebrows raised. One man near the door whispered, "Anthony Carter, right? He's in the army, stationed out at Fort Leonard Wood. That's only 40 minutes from here." The college kids sat up straighter. "Wait, his son's military?" "Major," the man confirmed. "Decorated. Whole town knows." The whispers started up again, this time heavier, charged. Now, it wasn't just talk about Eugene being too old to fight back. It was about who was coming. And Kyle, for the first time, looked less sure of himself. He masked it with another laugh, but his hand twitched nervously at his side. Eugene reached for his napkin, wiped his mouth, and set it neatly beside his plate. He wasn't eating anymore. He was waiting too. But while the room whispered about who was coming, Eugene's phone was already buzzing in his pocket. The buzzing in Eugene's pocket cut through the thick silence like a reminder that the outside world still existed. Slowly, he reached for his phone, flipped it open, and pressed it to his ear. His movements weren't rushed. Everything about him was deliberate, steady. "Hello?" His voice was calm, almost casual, but every pair of eyes in the diner was locked on him. On the other end, Anthony's tone came through firm but warm. "Dad, I just got your message." "What happened?" Kyle smirked, leaning closer, trying to listen in. "Oh, here we go. Gonna cry to your boy now?" he muttered loud enough for people nearby to hear. Eugene ignored him, focusing on the voice he trusted most. "I'm at Louie's diner," he said simply. "Got into a little situation." "What kind of situation?" Anthony's voice sharpened. Eugene glanced at Kyle, then back to the counter, his tone never shifting. "A disrespectful man thought it was wise to put his hands on me. I told him I'd wait until you arrived." For a second, the diner went stiller than before. Even Brenda leaned in, pretending to stack cups just to catch more of the conversation. Anthony's voice came through like a blade, controlled but edged with fire. "He did what?" "Don't rush," Eugene replied, calm as ever. "Take your time." "I'm not hurt," but Anthony wasn't buying it. "Dad, you know I can't let that slide. I'm less than half an hour away. I'll bring a couple of the guys. They're with me at the base." Kyle tilted his head, his smirk faltering slightly. "What's he gonna do? Call the whole army on me?" He laughed, but this time it felt weaker, forced. Eugene held the phone steady. "Son, I don't need a fight. I just need him to learn what respect means. You understand?" There was a pause on the line. Then Anthony's voice came back firm, measured. "I understand. I'll be there soon." Eugene ended the call and placed the phone carefully on the counter. He folded his hands, stared at his empty plate, and exhaled softly. The whispers picked up again around the room. "Did you hear that? He's bringing soldiers. Major Carter, I've heard of him. Supposed to be tough as nails. Man, this biker has no idea what's coming." Kyle turned on them. "Shut up, all of you." His fists tightened, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes now. Eugene finally spoke again, his voice even, but directed straight at Kyle. "You've got 20 minutes to think about what you've done. You might want to use them wisely." That sentence landed heavier than any punch could. Brenda swallowed hard. She leaned toward Eugene. "Mr. Carter, I don't mean any disrespect, but are you sure this is the right way? Things might get ugly." Eugene gave her a soft smile. Sometimes the best lessons come when a man sees his reflection, not his fists. The truck driver muttered under his breath. "Amen to that." Kyle barked out a laugh, though his voice cracked. "You all think some army boy's gonna scare me? I've handled worse. He's just flesh and bone like the rest of us." But no one responded. No one agreed with him. For the first time since walking in, Kyle stood on an island of his own making, his voice bouncing back empty. Eugene adjusted his jacket, his hand brushing the patch sewn on the sleeve, faded but proud. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't move an inch. He just waited, eyes calm, as if he already knew how this story would end. But Kyle couldn't stand silence. So instead of waiting, he started running his mouth louder and uglier than ever before. The tension was stretching thin, like a rope about to snap. Kyle paced back and forth in front of the counter, his boots thumping against the floor. The silence in the room was suffocating him, so he filled it with noise. "You all think some soldier boy's gonna walk in here and scare me?" he shouted, gesturing wildly. "I've dealt with cops, bouncers, gangs, you name it. Nobody tells Kyle Mercer what to do. His voice bounced across the diner's chrome walls. Nobody answered. Yeah, that's right, he continued, glaring at each booth in turn. I see you all whispering, acting like you know something. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. Brenda's hands trembled as she set down another pot of coffee. Kyle, just sit down. You're making it worse. He snapped toward her, his tone sharp. You keep quiet, Brenda. You've been serving me long enough to know I don't take orders. That earned him glares from a few regulars, but none of them moved. They were waiting, just like Eugene, though their patience carried nerves instead of calm. Kyle leaned over Eugene again, lowering his voice so it was only just audible to those nearby. Your son thinks he's a tough guy, huh? What's he gonna do, lecture me? Maybe flash some medals? He chuckled cruelly. I'll put him on the ground before he even takes his hat off. Eugene didn't blink. He simply met his stare, unshaken. If you believe that, you don't know my boy. That reply seemed to sting worse than silence. Kyle sneered, clenching his jaw. Your boy, huh? Let me tell you something, old man. Blood or not, he ain't gonna save you when I decide I'm done talking. He flexed his hands like he was itching for a fight, but the truth was written in his eyes. His swagger had cracks in it. A man at the corner booth, a mechanic named Howard, who usually kept to himself, finally spoke up. Kyle, you ought to quit while you can. You're digging your own grave. Kyle spun toward him, nostrils flaring. Say that again? Howard leaned forward, elbows on the table, steady as stone. I said quit. You've already crossed the line. You don't want to cross the next one. The words made Kyle pause, if only for a breath, but his pride roared louder than his reason. You think I'm scared? Let him come. Let this so-called major show up with his little buddies. I'll stand right here and show every one of you how weak your heroes really are. The college kids exchanged uneasy looks. One whispered, he's bluffing. He's terrified. The other shook his head. Maybe. But terrified men do stupid things. Kyle marched back to the counter, planting himself in front of Eugene. You know what I see when I look at you? A man who wasted his life, fighting wars that didn't change a damn thing. You think people remember? They don't. They laugh at you behind your back. Eugene set his coffee cup down with a soft clink, finally turning his full body to face him. His voice stayed even. Respect isn't something you take, Kyle. It's something you give so it can be given back. That's a lesson you never learned. The words hung heavy. For a brief second, it looked like Kyle had no comeback. Then he laughed, loud, harsh, the kind of laugh that dared anyone to contradict him. Respect? Respect doesn't mean nothing when fists do the talking, and when that door opens, I'll make sure your son learns the same lesson you should have. The truck driver shook his head, muttering to no one in particular. Man's writing a check his body can't cash. Eugene stayed silent now, his eyes steady on the door. Every tick of the clock on the wall pulled them closer to the moment. But the moment Kyle had been mocking was nearly here, because the rumble of boots was already approaching outside. The diner clock ticked, each second stretching longer than the last. Kyle was still pacing, muttering under his breath, when the sound came. It wasn't the roar of motorcycles. It wasn't sirens. It was the steady stomp of boots against pavement, measured, heavy, deliberate. The kind of rhythm that belonged to men who knew exactly where they were going. Heads turned toward the glass door. Conversations cut short. Even Kyle's ranting trailed off. The door swung open with a chime of the bell, and in walked Major Anthony Carter. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in fatigues that hadn't even had time to lose the dust from training. His eyes scanned the room in one sweep, landing instantly on his father. Dad, Anthony said, voice low but firm. Eugene nodded once. Son. Behind Anthony, 3 soldiers followed. They weren't loud. They didn't puff their chests. They simply entered with a presence that made every booth straighten a little taller. Kyle's smirk flickered. He tried to cover it with bravado. Oh, here we go. Daddy brought the army. He spread his arms wide, grinning at the room. What, you think uniforms scare me? Anthony didn't look at him. Not yet. He crossed the diner floor, boots thudding, and stopped beside his father. He studied the red mark on Eugene's cheek. His jaw tightened, but his words stayed controlled. Who put their hands on you? Eugene didn't answer with anger. He just tilted his head slightly toward Kyle. Anthony finally turned. His eyes met Kyle's, and for the first time, the biker's swagger faltered. There was no yelling, no threats in Anthony's gaze, just a cold, steady stare that carried the weight of discipline and consequence. "You," Anthony said evenly, "you touched my father?" Kyle forced a laugh, but it came out thin. "Yeah, I did. What are you going to do about it? You think that uniform makes you special?" Anthony stepped closer, the other soldiers right behind him. The room seemed to shrink. "This uniform," he said calmly, "represents sacrifice. It represents men like him who gave more than you'll ever understand. And you thought it was smart to put your hand on him?" Kyle puffed his chest, voice louder now. "He's just an old man. You can't hide behind that forever. Respect? That's earned by strength." Anthony didn't blink. "No. Strength without respect is just weakness in disguise." The soldiers flanking him stayed silent, their posture enough to fill the space with tension. One of them, a sergeant, locked eyes with Kyle like he was measuring him, deciding whether the man was worth a single ounce of attention. The customers were silent too, watching like they were caught in the middle of something larger than a diner dispute. Kyle tried one last shot at bravado. "You can bring all the soldiers you want. I ain't afraid. You put me in a fight with any one of you, I'll—" Anthony cut him off, his tone suddenly sharper. "You won't." That single interruption silenced the biker completely. Anthony leaned in just enough so that Kyle couldn't mistake his words. "You laid your hand on a man who fought for freedoms you take for granted. That ends here. You've got one chance to make it right, and you'd better take it." The biker's lips parted, but no sound came. His bravado cracked under the weight of eyes on him, not just the soldiers, but every person in the diner. People who had seen him swagger in with noise and fists, now watching him shrink under quiet authority. Eugene finally spoke again, his voice calm but carrying through the room. "Respect, son. That's all this was ever about. He needed to learn it. And now he's got the chance." Kyle's face burned red. His fists flexed, but his shoulders slumped just slightly, the fight draining out of him. But Anthony wasn't finished yet, because confrontation wasn't just about standing tall, it was about demanding change. Anthony didn't rush. He stood tall, shoulders squared, letting silence carry more weight than shouting ever could. When he finally spoke, every word was precise, cutting through the thick air of the diner. "You put your hands on a man who's older than you, stronger in ways you'll never understand, and who already fought battles so you wouldn't have to. Tell me, Kyle, what exactly did you prove by slapping him?" Kyle shifted on his boots. His mouth opened, but the words caught. He tried to smirk, tried to rebuild the swagger, but under the gaze of Anthony and his soldiers, it faltered. He, Kyle stammered. "He disrespected me, acted like he was better." Anthony stepped closer, his voice unwavering. "Better? My father never had to say a word to be better than what you're showing right now. Respect doesn't come from loud voices or cheap threats. It comes from how you treat people, especially those who paved the way before you." The sergeant behind Anthony added quietly but firmly, "Where we come from, you lay hands on a man like him, you answer for it." Kyle's head jerked toward him, then back to Anthony. "So what, you gonna hit me? Show the whole diner you're just like me?" Anthony shook his head. "No, that's the difference between us. I don't need to hit you. I just need you to understand that every eye in this room is watching. They saw what you did, and they'll remember who you are because of it." Eugene, still calm at the counter, folded his napkin neatly and spoke again. "Son, the mark on my cheek will fade by tomorrow, but the mark on your name, that one you'll carry for the rest of your life." The words cut deeper than any threat. Several heads in the diner nodded in agreement. The truck driver muttered, "Preach, Mr. Carter." Kyle's fists tightened, but his voice cracked. "You all don't know me." Anthony's eyes bore into him. "We know enough. We know you tried to humiliate a man who's given more than you'll ever give. We know you thought strength was measured in who you could slap, and we know right now you've got a choice." He paused, letting the weight sink in. "Either you walk out of here with your head down and think about the man you want to be, or you stand here and prove to everyone that all you'll ever be is a bully." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kyle's chest rose and fell faster now. Sweat lined his brow. His eyes darted to the door, then back to Eugene, then to Anthony. For the first time, he looked small. Brenda broke the silence, her voice steady but soft. "Kyle, we all saw it. You crossed the line. You know you did." The mechanic in the corner added, "And if you've got any sense left, you'll make it right before it's too late." Kyle's jaw worked. He swallowed hard, looking at Eugene again. The veteran's eyes weren't angry. They weren't gloating. They were patient, as if still waiting for him to choose dignity over pride. Anthony leaned in one last time, his voice low but firm. "Respect him. Now." While you still can, Kyle's lips pressed tight. His shoulders sagged, and then finally, he muttered, barely above a whisper, I'm sorry." It wasn't loud, it wasn't brave, but it was something. Eugene nodded once, his voice soft but steady. "Apology doesn't erase the action, but it's the start of change." Remember that Kyle's eyes flickered, shame crawling across his face. Anthony stepped back, giving him room. "Leave. Before you make another mistake." Kyle didn't argue. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He turned, muttered something under his breath, and pushed out the door. The rumble of his bike starting outside was the only sound breaking the silence. The diner exhaled as if it had been holding its breath the entire time. But even as Kyle left, the lesson wasn't over. Because everyone in that diner had just witnessed more than a confrontation. They'd witnessed a choice, and Eugene wanted to make sure they understood it. The door shut behind Kyle with a clang, leaving only the low rumble of his bike fading into the distance. For a long moment, no one in Louie's diner spoke. People looked at one another, then back to Eugene and Anthony, as if waiting for permission to breathe again. Eugene finally broke the silence with a steady voice. "It's over. You can all finish your meals now." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the booths, the kind of sound people make when tension begins to ease. Brenda stepped forward, resting a hand lightly on Eugene's shoulder. "Mr. Carter, you need some ice for that cheek?" He shook his head. "No, Brenda. I'll be fine. I've taken worse hits in my time." Anthony looked at him, frowning. "Dad, you shouldn't have had to take that one. Not here, not at your age, not after everything you've done." Eugene sipped his coffee, now lukewarm, and set the cup back down. "Life doesn't wait until you're ready for it to test you. That boy gave me his hand in anger, but in the end, he gave me his words in apology." Sometimes, that's all you can ask for. Anthony's soldiers exchanged glances, as if even they weren't expecting Eugene's calm reflection. One of them finally spoke. "Sir, with all due respect, you handled that better than most of us would have." Eugene smiled faintly. "That's the thing about age. You stop wasting strength on proving yourself. You learn that the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest." The truck driver leaned forward in his booth. "Ain't that the truth? I'll remember that one." The mother near the window, still holding her son, added softly, "My boy needed to see this today. Needed to see what real strength looks like." Eugene turned his eyes toward the boy and said, "Remember this, son. Respect is never earned by fists. It's earned by how you treat people, even when you don't feel like it." The boy nodded, wide-eyed, like he'd just been handed something valuable. Anthony rested a hand on his father's shoulder. "You've been teaching lessons your whole life, Dad." "Guess today was no different." Eugene chuckled lightly. "I've still got a few left in me." The soldiers relaxed, the room settling back into something close to normal. Plates clattered softly, conversations picked up again, though they were different now, quieter, more thoughtful. Every person in that diner had witnessed something they wouldn't forget. Anthony finally turned back to the customers. "What you all saw today, don't let it stop here. Don't let it just be a story you tell later. Think about the kind of person you want to be when the moment comes for you to choose between pride and respect. Because one day, it will come." His words landed with the weight of truth. Heads nodded slowly, one by one. Eugene finished his coffee, slid a few bills onto the counter, and stood with the same quiet dignity he'd shown from the start. His cheek was still red, but his spirit hadn't taken a scratch. He looked at Anthony, then at the soldiers, then at the crowd. "Don't measure a man by how loud he shouts," Eugene said, his voice carrying across the room. "Measure him by the respect he gives, even when he thinks nobody's watching." With that, he buttoned his jacket, gave Brenda a small nod of thanks, and walked toward the door with his son at his side. The diner watched him go, the bell above the door chiming once more. Nobody moved until the sound faded, but every person there knew they'd just witnessed something they'd carry for the rest of their lives. And maybe, just maybe, Kyle Mercer would carry it too. Stories like this remind us that dignity, respect, and patience will always outlast anger, mockery, and pride. If you believe the world needs more of those values, share this story with someone you care about. Let it be a reminder that strength isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you choose to honor.